Hello everyone, welcome to my channel where we bring you intriguing Nollywood movie stories. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to stay updated with our latest stories. Today we have a fascinating tale you're going to love. Feel free to like and leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Once upon a time, there was a young man named Fred. Not only was Fred wealthy, but he was also exceptionally handsome. Although he was considering marriage, he didn't have a particular woman in mind yet. Fred had strong views about the tradition of paying a bride price, and he felt it was a wasteful custom. One afternoon, Fred was relaxing in his living room with his two close friends, chatting casually. As they talked, he brought up his frustration with the bride price tradition. Speaking nonchalantly, he said, "Can you believe how much people waste on bride prices just to get married? It's practically a scam. When it's my turn, I'm not spending a fortune just to get a beautiful wife." His friend Ken looked at him with surprise. "Fred, are you serious? Paying the bride price is an age-old tradition. It's something every responsible man should do. Why are you talking like this?" Fred shrugged and replied confidently, "Bro, must we spend our life savings just to marry one woman? Here's my plan. I'll explore different cultures, compare bride prices from various villages, and choose the cheapest one. Why should I waste my money just to get married?" Ken was even more surprised. "Fred, you're wealthy. You have businesses worth millions. So what's the bride price that you can't afford?" Fred smirked. "Yes, I know I can afford it, but that doesn't mean I'm going to throw my money away on marriage." His friends looked at him in disbelief, but they knew Fred was serious. The next day, Fred decided to visit the home of a man named Mr. Kelvin, who had a beautiful daughter. Fred thought she might be the one he wanted to marry, so he went to speak with her father to start the marriage discussions. Sitting in Mr. Kelvin's living room, Fred spoke confidently. "Sir, I've come here because I've seen a beautiful flower in your home and I want to pluck it. I'm here to do the right thing, as our people say." Mr. Kelvin smiled, pleased with Fred's approach. "My son, you have done well by coming here. This is the right thing to do," he replied warmly. They continued talking and getting to know each other. The young woman, dressed in traditional Igbo attire, blushed and smiled as she listened to their conversation. Everything was going smoothly until Mr. Kelvin handed Fred a piece of paper. It listed the items required for the bride price, and when Fred saw the total, he could barely believe it. 8 million Naira, he thought, shocked. Mr. Kelvin noticed Fred's reaction and asked, "Is something wrong, my son?" Quickly gathering himself, Fred replied, "Oh no, nothing at all, sir." But inside, he was reeling from the amount. A few minutes later, Fred stood up. "Sir, I really must be going now. I have something urgent to take care of," he said, trying to make a quick exit. Mr. Kelvin looked at him in surprise. "You're leaving already? But you just arrived a little while ago." "Yes, sir, I need to handle something," Fred replied, and he left hurriedly. That evening, Fred met up with his friends, venting his frustration. "Can you believe it, guys? Mr. Kelvin wants me to buy items worth 8 million Naira just to marry his daughter. This man only wants to cash in on me. It's not going to work. I'm smarter than that." Ken nodded. "Honestly, Fred, bride prices have become expensive these days. We are in the 21st century, after all." Fred leaned back confidently. "Exactly. I'll show you all that I can marry a beautiful woman without paying an outrageous bride price." Over the next several days, Fred visited different families, asking about their bride prices, hoping to find a place where it wouldn't cost him much. But each visit only offended more families, and Fred ended up disappointing several young women who had thought he was genuinely interested in them. One day, Fred went to another family's home to inquire about their bride price. He was welcomed warmly, and they all sat together at the dining table, chatting and getting to know each other. The girl's parents smiled, ready to answer Fred's question when he asked about the requirements for marriage. The girl's father began to list the items. "To marry our daughter, you'll need 100 tubers of yam, 20 packs of red wine, 10 cows, 5 male goats, and 3 bags of rice." As Fred listened, his eyes widened in shock. He thought to himself, "I'll spend all my money on these items just for a wife? I need to get out of this before they rip me off." Before the man could finish listing the requirements, Fred interrupted. Please excuse me, sir. I have to take an important business call outside. The father nodded. Of course, no problem. Go ahead and we'll wait for you. Fred quickly stepped outside, pretending to take a call, but instead, he got into his car, started the engine and drove away. The girl and her parents rushed outside, calling after him, but Fred rolled up his window, pretended not to hear, and sped off, leaving them disappointed and stunned. The young woman, heartbroken, began to cry. Fred left me without a word. This is so painful. What did I do wrong, Dad? Mom, I did everything to make him happy. Her parents comforted her as she wept, but through her tears she vowed, I'll make sure Fred pays for what he did to me. I won't let him get away with this. One evening, Fred was sitting in a nice bar with his friends, laughing and sharing stories. As they relaxed, he began recounting his recent experience of inquiring about a bride price. Guys, you won't believe it, he exclaimed. Yesterday I went to ask for a girl's bride price, and they demanded 100 tubers of yam. He exaggerated for effect. Do they know how much yams cost these days? And that wasn't even all. They wanted 20 packs of red wine, 10 cows, 5 male goats, 3 bags of rice, and a ton of other things. They're just looking to drain my wallet. His friends laughed as he went on, and one of them asked, So what did you do after hearing that? Fred grinned. What do you think? I pretended I had to make a call, walked outside, and just left. You should have seen their faces. They all laughed harder as he added, Guys, I really served her breakfast, using a slang term for breaking someone's heart. While they were joking about it, a tall, elegant woman walked into the bar, catching all their attention. Her beauty and presence were captivating. Fred immediately became serious. Guys, that's the woman I'm going to marry. I'll do whatever it takes to make it happen. One of his friends chuckled. Fred, you've been breaking hearts over bride prices for so long. How are you sure her bride price will be any cheaper? Fred shrugged confidently. Trust me, everything about this lady is perfect and affordable, he joked. Without waiting, he signaled to a waitress and paid for a drink to be sent to her. The waitress approached the beautiful woman, setting the drink on her table. Good evening, ma'am. That gentleman over there paid for your drink, she said, gesturing toward Fred. The woman glanced at Fred, smiled and nodded in appreciation. Seeing her reaction, Fred decided to make his move. He walked over, smiling, and said, Good evening, beautiful. Good evening, handsome, she replied with a friendly smile. They spent a long time chatting, and Fred was immediately drawn to her in a way he'd never felt before. Her name was Angel, and everything about her was irresistible. Usually, Fred kept things casual with other women, but with Angel, something felt different. By the end of the evening, he was smitten. Later that night, Fred was back with his friends, talking about Angel. Guys, I'm serious about this one. I want to build something real with her. I want to marry her. Ken looked at him, skeptical but supportive. Fred, are you sure? You're not exactly the type to settle down. I know, but this time I'm serious. I want to spend the rest of my life with Angel. Ken nodded. But you've always had issues with paying bride prices. Fred cut him off confidently. Don't worry about that. This time it's different. A few weeks later, Fred decided to visit Angel's family and formally ask about her bride price. Sitting in his living room, he dressed up, feeling both excited and nervous. What if her bride price is really high? He wondered. I'll have to break her heart, just like I've done with the others. But then he paused, realizing how much he genuinely cared for Angel. No, I won't let anything, not even a bride price, come between us. With renewed determination, he went to Angel's house. Angel and her parents warmly welcomed him into their home. They chatted comfortably until Fred made his intentions clear. Turning to Angel's parents, he said respectfully, Sir, ma'am, I'm very interested in your daughter, and I'd like to marry her. I've come to ask about the bride price so I can do the needful. Angel's parents exchanged a knowing look and then laughed lightly. Her father said, My son, it's clear that you truly love our daughter, and we can see you're a good man who will take care of her, so there's no need for any bride price. Fred was so surprised that he couldn't help but exclaim, Yes, realizing his luck. Catching himself, he quickly apologized, embarrassed by his enthusiasm. Angel's father continued, The only thing our tradition requires is that you give 10 Naira to the village elders and another 10 Naira to us. Once that's done, You'll receive our blessings to marry Angel." Fred could hardly believe his ears. It sounded too good to be true. "Sir, do people really marry without paying a bride price these days?" he asked, still in disbelief. Angel's mother explained, "We understand that high bride prices have discouraged many good suitors, leaving some young women unmarried for years. So, our community decided to make things easier, so men like you can marry the women they love without facing an unreasonable financial burden." Though a small part of Fred felt something was off. His excitement over finally finding a bride price he could easily afford silenced his doubts. All he could focus on was his love for Angel. He glanced at her and saw her beautiful smile, which made his heart race. The next day, as he sat alone in his room, he thought carefully about all that had happened. He was overwhelmed by his feelings for Angel, imagining their future together. He even thought of talking to his friends for their advice, but his love and excitement to start a life with Angel were too strong. For now, all he wanted was to marry her as soon as possible. The following week, Fred and his friends travelled to Angel's village for the wedding ceremony. It was a grand event full of colour and life, with people dressed in vibrant Igbo attire, food covering all the tables, and guests from far and wide celebrating. The atmosphere was lively and joyful. After the main ceremony, Fred was called to meet with the village elders, a group of short, grey-haired old men with toothless grins and serious expressions. Fred held 10 Naira in his hand, ready to pay the bride price for Angel. But to his shock, one of the elders, a small and intimidating man, approached him and asked, "My son, you have come to marry our daughter?" "Yes, sir," Fred replied, suddenly feeling nervous. The elder continued, "According to our tradition, you must prove you can take care of our daughter." Confidently, Fred assumed they would ask him a few questions, so he smiled and nodded. But then the elder added, "You must climb 7 coconut trees, endure 100 strokes of a cane from each of us, and finally, break open palm kernels with your bare hands. Only then will you be allowed to marry Angel." Fred was stunned, but seeing Angel watching, he didn't want to seem weak. Trying to impress her, he shrugged and said, "That's easy. The first task was to climb the coconut trees." He made his first attempt, but after climbing only 3 feet, he lost his grip and fell, hitting the ground hard with a cry of pain. "Yay!" The pain was intense, but seeing Angel cheering him on, he pushed himself to try again. His friend Ken shouted sarcastically, "Come on, Fred! You're doing this for Angel!" Pushed by pride, Fred ignored Ken's teasing. Managed to struggle up the trees and completed the first task. He felt proud, especially when Angel hugged him, making all the pain seem worth it. Next was the Cain test. Each of the 10 elders was to give him 100 strokes. Fred removed his shirt and lay on the ground, bracing himself. The first elder dipped his cane in water and then delivered the first stroke. Pain seared through Fred's back and he leaped up with a yelp. Ken, enjoying the spectacle, teased him again. "Come on, Fred! All for love!" Fred gritted his teeth and lay back down, enduring a few more strokes. But by the 9th, he couldn't bear it anymore. He stood up and cried, "Do you all want to kill me? I came here to marry, not to be punished. Please, I can't continue the marriage anymore." One elder stepped forward, his voice stern. Abomination. Quitting is forbidden. Our tradition must be honored." Desperate, Fred pleaded, "I love Angel, but I can't continue with this. If there's any other thing to do, just tell me. I will do it." Feeling frustrated, the elder replied, "If you cannot complete the tasks, the only way out is to pay a fine of 20 million Naira for the bride price." Fred was shocked. Realizing they were serious, he finally surrendered. "Fine," he said, pulling out his phone and transferring the money in haste, not wanting to wait a single minute. With that, the ceremony was completed. The next day, Fred sat in his living room with his friends when they started teasing him about everything that had happened. They all laughed, especially at the part where he had to endure the cane strokes. Just then, Angel walked in and joined in the laughter. Fred was confused, so he asked, "Why are you laughing too, Angel?" Ken stepped in and explained, "Fred, we planned all of this with Angel's family. We knew you loved her, but also that you'd never agree to a high bride price, so we made it challenging, knowing that you'd end up paying. In reality, the bride price was only 2 million Naira. The extra money you paid was used for the ceremony costs, and we got back the amount we invested." Fred's jaw dropped. "What about those scary elders?" he asked, still in disbelief. Ken laughed. "They were paid to act. Don't worry, they had a great time." Realizing he'd been tricked, Fred was at a loss for words. But Ken teased him further. "If you're no longer interested in marrying Angel, I'll take her since we've already paid the bride price." Fred snapped back. "Oh, really? Did you help me get flogged or climb those trees?" Everyone burst out laughing, and they apologized to Fred for the prank. The atmosphere lightened, and Fred eventually joined in the laughter. He learned a valuable lesson that day. Marriage sometimes requires sacrifices, and love and commitment are worth far more than any bride price. So everyone was happy, and they all lived together in harmony. Thanks for watching. I believe you enjoyed and learned a lot from this story. Kindly subscribe to this channel to get more of our latest Nollywood movie stories.